How have you dodged a bullet in your life? When I was 5, I was at a 5-year-old kid's house that my parents didn't know too well. He took his dad's pistol off the top of the refrigerator to show me. It made me very uncomfortable. I didn't like being a tattletale, but I did tell my mom when I got home, because I just didn't feel right about it. At first she didn't believe it was a real gun. Then she decided to call the parents. There was no answer, and no answering machines back then. I find out the next day that he accidentally shot and killed another friend whom he was showing just hours after me. Mum got no answer by phone, because it was a big emergency scene, ambulance, police, etc. In Iraq we had a new driver and he slowed down a lot for a puddle for some reason, and there was an IED in it. Ended up going off under the engine block instead of the cab. Saved all of us. I imagine all the passengers in the truck yelling and calling him a P right before the explosion. I almost walked in front of a bus once. I wasn't paying attention and was about to step out right in front of a speeding bus and a complete stranger pulled me back by my collar and saved my life. I dodged a bus, which is kind of like a slower, larger bullet. Whoa, there's been a lot of those. Actually, I was born 2 months early, as my mom had to start chemotherapy. Right after I'm born, I get incredibly high fever. The medical staff can't figure out why. They are completely stumped. After 2 days of trying to solve the puzzle, they noticed that one of the nurses had turned the incubator up too high. They were cooking me. Basting you with butter was a dead giveaway though. When breaking up with an ex, she grabbed super glue from my craft table and tried to squirt it in my eyes, while yelling, "Oh yeah, how you frickin' like this?" Fortunately the glue had dried in the tip. I'm sure she will be a good mother. I imagine your ex as an angry kindergartner. I was motoring down Interstate 80 in Wyoming at about 1 AM, and had to pee while waiting for a wreck up the road to clear. A semi was in front of me, and I was the last car in line. I pull over onto the shoulder, grab my pee bottle, and start to go, then screech. Wham, another semi slams straight into the back of semi I was behind. Easily crunched 20 feet of a 53 feet trailer. I'm going to assume that if I didn't pull over, I would have been DA'd in that accident. Thankfully I was still in the pee bottle and the rest got scared out of me. Later on in that trip, as it was late and I didn't want to moosh a deer, I got behind a semi. They hit a deer, literally vaporized it, and my car was covered in deer goo. It was fun cleaning that off. The truck stopped right down the road from a prison. I was driving my brother to his first ever Packer game in a rental car. I was going about 80 and got pegged by an Oshkosh trooper about 40 miles from Green Bay. I was very polite and apologetic, explaining that we were very excited because it was my brother's first ever Packer game and it was his 15th birthday. He took my license and ran it. Turns out my license was suspended due to a ticket from 4 years earlier. Paid the ticket but not the ill reinstatement fee, and I had no idea. The cop said to me outside the car, "I don't want to ruin your brother's birthday, so I'm gonna go back to my car and if you drive off, well, there's nothing I can do, I guess." I still got $400 in tickets, but did not end up with a messy towing situation. I shook his hand and thanked him. We made it to the game in plenty of time and I drove the speed limit the entire rest of the trip. The Packers beat the Titans 55-7 that day and it was something my brother will never forget. TLDR. Being polite during traffic stops goes a long way. I don't think any Wisconsin cop would stop someone from seeing their first Packer game. I dodged a little bullet in university. 2 guys got in a fight outside my window. Gun went off. Bullet zipped through our living room about an inch away from my head. Landlord installed plexiglass windows after that. When life shoots a gun at you, shoot back. 19 Wyoming, working road construction with a traveling crew. Bunk down, reading a book for the evening during a thunderstorm in the back of my pickup. Had a topper and mattress for the truck bed. Out of the corner of my eye, I think I see something move. Several times this happens, so I get out and get into the cab. Sure enough, the wind picks up, and this giant drop feed grain bin that I was parked next to starts to move, slide on its concrete pad. Start the engine, throw it in reverse, and I'm gunning out of the spot as the bin starts to tip. while thousands of pounds of grain storage was quickly filling the windshield. The vehicle bogged down, and I got stuck in a mud hole as the grain bin crashed down 3 inches from my front bumper, laying exactly where I had been parked 7 seconds earlier. Grew up close to a set of railroad tracks. There were 3 tracks that ran parallel to each other. When I was 15, me and a couple of friends used to walk the tracks to get back and forth to each other's houses. One day we were all walking down the tracks and there was a train approaching us on the track directly to our left. We were on the outside track, the train approaching was on the middle track. As the engine is approaching us, one of the operators was literally hanging out the window screaming at the top of his lungs and pointing behind us. We could not hear what he was yelling because when you're right next to a freight train going 70 miles per hour, that's all you can hear. Well, we look behind us and there is another train on our track barreling at us at full speed. It was probably 30-40 yards from us at that point. Me being the furthest from the right and having both my friends in the way, I never would have made if I had tried to jump in the same direction. At this point I have a train coming directly at me at 70 miles per hour. A train going in the opposite direction on the track directly to my left at 70 miles per hour. And my 2 friends who are directly to my right leaping for their lives to the right off the track, and I have about 1 second to get out of the way. Leaping to the right is no sure thing. So I sort of did a half jump to the left and lied down in the small space between the 2 trains. I would say I was about 6 inches from either train. I have never been so scared or shaken in my entire life. This started to sound suspiciously like a word problem around the 3rd paragraph. Standing on top of a generator while filling it in Iraq. Head was above the fence line. Bullets struck the wall behind me. Then I heard the crack of the rifle. I didn't stand that high after that. So I guess I dodged a bullet by dodging a bullet. My father had HIV and have it to my mom sometime before around the time I was born. Both of my parents have since passed from that and drug related causes. I'm a minority, disease free, did my time in the military, and should be graduating from college in the next year. I like to think I beat some pretty bad odds. And you're dead. Got into a drunken brawl with my dad during a Halloween party. I was underage, 19, at the time, on probation, and the cops were on their way because of said fight. I end up coming to the conclusion that I have absolutely no way to get myself out of this. I can't balls out of my dad's eyelid being split. I still feel terrible about this. So I give the police the play-by-play. I didn't lie or omit anything from the story, and I figure I'm going to jail. Well, at this time, cop number 2 comes out and tells his partner it's time for them to leave. What? Your dad said that in his drunken state? He slipped and smacked his face on the counter in the kitchen. Isn't that what happened? He shot me a look like, I do not want to deal with you tonight. So I just replied, with a head nod, and hid in my room for the next week. TLDR. Got drunk, got into a fight with dad and he covered for me with the cops. On the day I soloed at the end of my ultralight course, I did my last flight with my instructor in the 2-place trainer. It was a half-hour flight to go over everything I had learned. Having accomplished that, we landed and I strapped into the single seat and did my solo flight. The other student in the course went up with the same instructor to finish his last instruction in the 2-place. 20 minutes later the aircraft broke up in flight and crashed into the lake from 2000 AGL. Both were killed. Got robbed at gunpoint once while working for a truck stop video poker place. About a month later the same guys robbed it again on a night I called in sick and killed the security guard. Why would you kill the security guard? As a friend and I were driving back from Arapahoe Basin in Colorado, my friend and I caught a patch of ice and the car slid off Loveland Pass. We managed to jump out while it was still sliding 15-20 miles per hour before the car rolled 500 plus feet down a rocky cliff. Was in the middle of commenting in this thread about avoiding sexual relations with a certified psycho when my spidey sense started tingling. I quickly switched tabs to a work related page and put on a super professional, I am a hard worker and definitely not messing around on company time face on as our new manager. My boss stopped by for a meet and greet, nailed the handshake. TLDR. Dodge a bullet while writing about dodging a bullet. That type of spidey sense is very valuable when surfing Reddit at work. That and learning what your boss's footsteps sound like. I once walked into the trees to take a pee during the night while camping. Looking back at the campfire, I decided to go a little further into the trees as I had a shy bladder at the time. Luckily, after a few steps my laziness overcame my shyness and I decided to just do it. After I finished, I turned around, went back to my tent and slept the sleep of the truly exhausted. The next morning I got up and went once more to the trees to relieve myself. What I saw very nearly made me pee in my pants right on the spot. The edge of a cliff, roughly 400 feet high, was about 3 or 4 steps beyond where I had decided, randomly, to stop to pee the night before. Because we had been traveling on foot for about 2 hours after dark the previous night, I'd had no idea we were camped beside a tree-covered cliff line and the responsible adult in charge was too stupid to think it important information. Always shuffle your feet while in the dark. Never step. I have told this story before, so I'll just paraphrase. I just turned 17 about 2 months prior to this. I was out with my older sister, 27, and her friend, 32, drinking. I drank too much and passed out on the couch. My sister's friend decided that she was gonna have sex with me because she wants a kid and her husband is infertile. I wake up as I'm cooming inside her. 2 weeks later I find out she's pregnant. 2 weeks after that I find out she had a miscarriage. Thank God. Raped by a woman and she miscarried. Dated a girl with $25k in credit card debt who would endlessly buy things with any wiggle room she had when she paid the minimum balance on her credit cards. When confronted about her spending habits, she'd get insanely defensive. Got the frick out of there. Well, I got shot at whilst hunting on public land. The bullet zipped overhead and my dad turned and fired in response into the ground to let them know we were not deer. It was after legal shooting time last day of the season. And proceeded to cuss the crap out of whoever it was as we ran down the fire break back to the truck. Every girl I have ever slept with got pregnant from someone else no more than 3 months after we did the deed. In the cases where we were in a relationship, it happened right after we broke up. I'm like the good luck Chuck of unexpected pregnancies. Glad I didn't get stuck with any of those, but on a more positive note, is anyone here having trouble conceiving? You sound exactly like my cousin, except they get pregnant and married within a year. Not sure if it counts as dodging a bullet so much as glancing one. It was after watching a movie at the local theater with some friends. We all agreed to go to a nice Italian restaurant a short walk from it that also happened to be across the street. Friends went ahead of me as I had to go to the restroom first, and so as I made my way across the street at the crosswalk with a stop sign to meet them, something caught my eye. It was a woman going far too fast on a tiny 2-lane road passing a busy shopping center, blatantly speeding above acceptable levels and talking on her phone, and I was right in her path. Knowing I couldn't get out of the way fast enough, my instincts and reflexes told me to jump and curl into a ball as best I could, which I did. And I landed on the hood of her car cannonball style and shoulder first and proceeded to roll over the roof. Broke the antennae that was on the back as I rolled off, and hit the pavement on my back as I uncurled. I was bruised as heck as I stood up, or was about to be bruised anyway once my body got to work, but it was better than getting hit head on by a car going about 25 miles per hour or so. Hope that was a wake-up call for her. Glad you were okay. Was engaging from the escape hatch of my truck, got down to reload, just as an RPG struck the RPG cage about 2 feet to my right. They missed. This is dodge a bullet time, not dodge an RPG time. I believe you so have had your nuts in your throat enough. Thank you for your service. When I was 16 years old, some jock douchebag randomly took a 22-calorie revolver and pointed it at the side of my head like it was a joke, and then pulled the trigger and it clicked. Then he pointed it at the wall and put a bullet through the wall. I was thinking of switching jobs and had an interview with a team in another company. I ended up not getting the job. I was bummed out about it. 1 month later the whole team was laid off. I'm an Indian working in USA on work visa. If I had got that job and got laid off, then I had to get another job in 2 weeks or leave the country because of my visa restrictions. I love this country and its people way too much to leave. I was supposed to be on the Carnival cruise that lost power at sea. We missed the departure because our flight was delayed. I think I dodged a huge bullet recently. Someone broke into my apartment while I was gone. Based on the items taken, I know it was my ex. Tried to sneak in through my window and ended up kicking my door in. Pretty terrifying to think what could have happened if I was there. Took the spare key too. Ahem, change the locks. I have a scar on the back of my neck from a ricochet that bounced off a wall, then a truck then hit me. It lost all its velocity because it bounced twice, but I did get a nasty burn because it was still hot. I'd post pics but I'm at work. I got ricocheted in the wrist at featuring Benning. Didn't feel it, but sure smelled the burning skin. In our screaming matches during our breakup after our 9-year relationship, he admitted coming inside me on occasion to try and get me pregnant when he said he pulled out. He said since I didn't get pregnant, something must be wrong with me not being able to conceive and I should get that checked out. PS, I know that method is not foolproof, but it's the intentional deception. I used to stick it in crazy and we broke up before she turned out to be crazier. She wanted to marry me and I didn't want to go that fast. I heard she tried to kill her husband years later and was on drugs. I dated this once. I had my doubts when her dad met me holding a large shotgun. He thought it was funny. She got married about 5 days after high school graduation, gained around 150 pounds in a year, and now lives in a single wide trailer on welfare. Went over a cliff while snowboarding. Dropped about 3 meters. Had I gone over the cliff 5 meters to the right I would have had a 12-15 meter drop. Way bigger chance for injury. That's when I learned to look before leaping. Back in grade 10, my science class had built and were launching small rockets with gunpowder engines. One guy's rocket was way too light to fire, and he had to fill the nose cone with pieces of metal to increase the mass, so it would actually land nearby. It decided that it would land right where I was sitting to watch. Thankfully I looked up to see the incoming rocket and jumped out of the way. It left a pretty decent dent on the bleachers where I was sighting. Oh geez. All I could think was gunpowder and pieces of metal and 10th grade construction abilities equals accidental frag grenade. Throw away. I was a teenager and asleep when a man broke into my bedroom and tried to rape and murder me. I was startled awake. There was a man beside my bed doing something. The noises he was making were unnatural enough though not loud, just out of place. It awoke me. As soon as he noticed I was awake, he jumped on me and told me to shut up and started strangling me hard. All my confusion melted away in that moment, and I realized I was going to die unless I got him off of me. He started shoving fingers into my vagina, and because he was only strangling me with one hand instead of two, when I started squirming violently, he lost his grip. I managed to fight him off, and my screaming surprised him and he fled. My parents called the police, who came and took my panties, and took pictures of the handprints left on my throat. Hours later, I went into my room to retrieve something, and found, to my dismay, the extension cord to my stereo had been cut. I started running over in my mind what could have happened that severed the end of the plug from the rest of the cord. I picked it up, trying to figure out the mystery when the other end cleared into my view, and I saw it had been neatly formed into a noose. The noises that he had made that had woken me up were the soft sounds of him cutting my extension cord and forming a noose with. It was more than big enough to fit my head through. To this day, I cannot sleep soundly at night, and take sleeping medication just to stay asleep at night. I obsessively check all the locks before bed. Any tiny sound will wake me up even though I take Ambien. It was only because I woke up when I did that I am alive today. If he hadn't stopped to make the noose, he probably would have succeeded in raping and killing me. This happened about 20 years ago. Every day I have is a gift, but I live with a lot of fear in my life. My husband and I literally dodged a bullet. Our kids were out of town with my parents so hubby and I could spend some time together. We ended up crashing on the futon in the living room. Early the next morning, we are awakened by a loud bang. My husband swears it was a gunshot, but I convince him it was probably the neighbor banging a cabinet. We end up going back to sleep. A couple of hours later, we get a knock on the door. It was a cop. He came over to see if we were alright. Come to find out, the neighbor's 2-year-old daughter had gotten a hold of the father's gun, shooting one into the wall adjacent to our apartment. The cop searched and searched for the exit point, but couldn't find it. It must have hit a stud. Measuring it from the neighbor's apartment, it would have passed 2 inches above us and right at the height of my daughter's bed. Bricks were shat, the father was merely sighted. We moved very soon after. TLDR. Shorted by a 2-year-old. Saved by a stud. My dad threatened to kill me, mom, bro and sis. He drunkenly tried to break in the house. After being thrown out one night, he couldn't get in, or gave up on trying. He hung himself in the garage instead. So, you know, there's that. Thread is probably too old, but here goes. In high school, this cute girl on the same bus route as me flirted with me constantly. She would sit on my lap and grind on me and whatnot. She would always want me to get off the bus at her house and hang out. I just never did. My parents probably would have killed me. Not 2 months later, she accused some poor kid of raping her at her house, and it ruined him for the rest of his high school career. I knew for a fact from her friends that they fooled around, but nothing ever happened. She just wanted the attention. Really sidestepped that business. Got into a confrontation with a friend that was a little unhinged. Escalated to the point that he pulled his gun on me and stuck it to my head. Long story. Instead of pee myself, which I was doing mentally, I challenged him to pull the trigger, since I was certain he would never have the guts to do so. He backed down, and I never saw him again. 2 years later, he ends up in jail for killing someone due to a road rage incident. He went a step further and ended up killing the father of the guy who testified. Mail bomb sent to family house. So yay. He was capable of pulling the trigger, and I lucked out. I decided not to write a college paper until the last moment. I wrote it and it was crap. But luckily there was a giant snowstorm and I got a week off of school, so I polished that turd the night before I had to go back to school the following week. I was 17/18 years old and still living at home with my parents in our tiny little town with no real direction in life. At the time, I was seeing this girl who was basically a poison. She brought out the worst in me. She was a pathological liar, a complete manipulator. We fought all of the time, etc. Officially we were only a couple for maybe a month or 2, but in reality our relationship lasted a year as I kept going back to her for the sex, which admittedly was amazing. Shortly after we first got together, she told me she was incapable of having kids and therefore she wasn't on birth control and we didn't need to use condoms. Stupid, young and frisky. I believed her despite all of the evidence I had at the time that I shouldn't trust a single word this girl ever said. I eventually realized that I needed to get this girl out of my life for good and broke it off completely, swearing that I would never make another booty call to her again. I got my crap together, finished one of those IT programs at the local community college, moved to the big city and got a great job that I'm still at 10 years later, and got married to a girl I knew in high school who also moved to the big city. But that's a whole other story. A couple of years after leaving my hometown, the crazy ex added me on Facebook, and what do you know, she had a kid. My whole life would have been drastically different had I gotten her pregnant, and to this day I have no idea how I didn't. And before you ask, I'm pretty sure the kid's not mine since he is half black. TLDR. Dodge a baby from my crazy ex GF who assured me she couldn't ever have kids. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.